Hey guys, it's John here from Sonic Drive Studio. Thank you so much for tuning into the channel. Today's video is going to be all about how I use and process Slate Drums 5. I've gotten quite a lot of requests about this, so I hope you enjoy this. Let's dive right in. So I have a session loaded up here in Cubase 10, and it's from one of my recent videos. It's the Angle Iron Ball video. Let's start off by taking a listen to a small section of the song. Here we go. Let's also take a listen to the drums soloed, so without all the other instruments. So that's sounding nice and punchy and also kind of roomy, which I like. Now let's go into SSD 5 and look at all the samples that I chose for this kit. Let's start off with the snare. I'm using the Snare Pearl 6.5 SEN snare, which is actually from the Deluxe 1 library, as you can see here. I love the sound of that snare, it's nice and full. But I'm blending that with the Dong, which is actually a snare from the Crystalloid Algae pack. And you can find that snare over here. And then I'm also blending that with the Snare Black SSD snare, which is the Metallica Black Album snare basically. And I'm mostly using that for the room sound. So it adds some nice crack and room reverb to the whole snare basically. For the kick, I am using the Kick 5 Energy, which is one of the classic samples over here. And you can find that in the Classics Volume 1 folder. It's a great sounding kick and it just works very well for me. But again, I am blending that with a kick from the Crystalloid Algae library, and it's the Kick DRW24 HBE kick, which you can find over here. It's nice and punchy and kind of dry sounding, so that's nice. And then finally, what I'm doing here is blending in the X-Layer kick depth sample, but on a quite low level. And sometimes for really fast double bass stuff or something, I'll just mute this one because sometimes it can be a little bit too much on the low end. And you can find this one in the Deluxe 2 library. It's a great sample for blending in to add some extra weight to your kick. And then for the toms, I'm using the Pearl MMC toms from the Deluxe 2 library. Great sounding toms. And for the hi-hats, I'm also using a hi-hat from the Deluxe 2. It's the Sabian 14-inch. Splash is also from the Deluxe 2 library. It's the 9-inch Sabian. And for the cymbals, I'm using two crashes from the Deluxe 2 library. It's the Zildjian 18-inch crash and the Paste 19-inch crash on the right side. Then I'm running the Sabian 20 Ride, which you can also find in this pack. And for the China, I'm running the Sabian 19-inch AAX, also from the Deluxe 2 library. Now, let's take a look at how I'm processing these drums. And we're going to start off by quickly looking at the master fader, just to give you an idea of what's going on there. We're running a limiter on the end here, and I'm using the FabFilter Pro L. And then before that, I'm running the virtual tape machines. Then the Aosis Air EQ, which I'm basically only using to add some high end, with the shelf here and with a little bit of air. And for the virtual bus compressors, I'm using all three actually. I'm not using the FG Gray for compression, just using it for a little bit of subtle coloring. Same goes for the FG Mu, but I've dialed down the mix control quite a bit here, because this one can color the signal quite a bit, and I only want just a little bit of that. So for the main bus compression duties on the whole mix, I'm using the FG Red over here. And when I play the song, you'll see how much of gain reduction is applied. So on average, it's reducing the gain by about 2 to 3 decibels. And then we have an instance of the virtual mix rack on the first slot of the master bus. Let's start off at the beginning here. First, I'm using the Air EQ Earth module to cut out all the low end under 30 Hz with a very steep slope. And then we're going into the virtual mix bus, which has been set to a group, and all the channels of the drums are in the same group. And it has been set to the Brit 4K E console, which I like for the sort of forward sound on the upper mids. Then we're going into a trimmer module just to ease down the gain, going into the New York Virtual Tube Collection module here, which is just there for some nice and subtle coloring over the whole mix. Then we're using the custom series lift here just to add some nice subtle high lift on the silky setting and some low lift on the big setting, just a little bit. Then finally the free revival module, which I'm just using to add a little bit of sparkle on the high end and a little bit of dimension to the low end. Then over to the drum bus. First, the entire drum kit is going into this compressor here, which is the Monster. This thing is basically here to make the drums slam a bit more, to glue them together a little bit more, and to add a bit more air and sustain to the drums. Then we're going into the New York Virtual Tube Collection module again, just to add some subtle coloring. And then after that, we're going into the FG Gray compressor, just to keep all the dynamics in check a little bit. What I'm going to do now is play you some of the drums and turn all these effects on the drum bus on and off so you can hear what they do. So basically these processors are adding a lot of excitement to the drums. They're also gluing the drums together a little bit and bringing the drums forward more. Okay, great. Let's go to the single channels. Let's start off with the kick drum and take a look at the settings that I'm running on that particular track. Let's listen to the kick solo for a second. So nice, punchy and weighty, but also very clear sounding. The virtual tape machine is on every channel. So I'll show you this once. It's basically the same settings for each channel. And then we're going into the virtual mix rack. And in this case, I'm only running the virtual channel from the Virtual Console collection here. And like I said before, it's on group number 1 with the Brit 4K E setting. Very simple. I mean, the kicks already sound great here. They're very nicely balanced. So there isn't any processing needed here. So as you can see, a very simple setup for this kick drum. Then let's take a look at the snare. Nice and punchy. As you can see, I'm running the channel EQ here. Let's take a listen at what I'm doing here. So I'm using this basically to cut out a little bit of that honky resonance. Then of course, again, the virtual tape machines, followed by the Aosis Air EQ, which I love. It's my favorite surgical equalizer. And as you can see here, I'm doing a surgical cut at about 1.1K. Let's take a listen at what I'm doing there. So there's just a little bit of ringing going on there. It's probably something that I noticed in the mix and then I decided to take it out. And then again, the virtual mix rack with the virtual channel here set on the same settings as before. Then I'm going into the custom series lift again, just to add some present high lift and some punchy low lift. And finally, again, the Monster Extreme Dynamic Processor. And I like to use the Snare Slammer preset here and just dial in the mix control here to get it just right. Now let's take a listen to the snare with and without the processing. So these simple steps make the snare sound more exciting and more alive. Then let's go over to the hi-hat channel. Not a lot going on here. Just some EQ here to remove some mids because those frequencies can get in the way of the guitars, especially when you have very heavy distorted guitars going on. So this is basically making some room for guitars and vocals and synthesizers and that sort of thing. Virtual tape machines again, and the virtual mix rack just with the virtual channel here. Then let's go over to the toms. Nice, punchy and big sounding. Once again, the virtual tape machines here. And again, the virtual mix rack with the virtual channel set on the exact same settings once again. Then we're going into the FGS EQ module here, which I'm only using to cut out some boxy mids. And then after that, we're going into the custom series lift again, which I love to use in drums, as you can see. And I'm basically using that to add some present high lift. Let's take a listen to these toms with the processing on and off. So basically we're just scooping out the mids and adding some top end with the high lift here. Then let's go to the overheads. Same sort of steps as with the hi-hat, just making some room in the mids for the guitars and synthesizers and all that. Then the virtual tape machines over here and virtual mix rack again with the virtual channel on the first slot. And then on the FGS we're cutting a little bit of mids here, which is followed by the monster. I'm basically using this to control the dynamics of the overheads a little bit more and to add a little bit of sustain to the cymbals. Let's take a listen to the overheads with and without processing. So scooping some of those mids out will make it sound a little bit more clear and open, which I like for modern rock and metal basically. Then we're going to room 1. Again, I'm cutting some mids here for the same reasons as before. Then of course the virtual tape machines as usual, going into the virtual mix rack and the virtual channel, followed by the FG116, which is basically a great compressor for drum room mics, just to add some more liveliness and excitement to the room. Let's take a listen to the room with and without processing. So that compressor does a great job of sort of gluing everything together. Then we're going into room 2. Again, just as with the other channels, removing some upper mids here to make room for the guitars. Virtual tape machines again, and the virtual mix rack with some monster and virtual channel going on. Let's take a quick listen with and without the processing. Both rooms combined. And then finally, we have the verb channel here. It's very low on volume, but it's running the reverb from the CLA pack. And finally, what I'll do is show you all the settings for the mixer here. As you can see, I've routed the drums out to different outputs in Cubase. I've muted the snare ring channel. So yeah, those were all my drum secrets of this awesome rock or metal preset. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider hitting subscribe along with the notification bell to stay up to date. And you can also follow Sonic Drive Studio on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers!